Everyone, welcome along to today's meeting. Tēnā koe Papatuanuku, tēnā koe Te Whare, ngā mihi mana whenua, kia ora koutou, kaunihera, kai mahi, nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Kia ora everyone, welcome along to today's meeting. If you'd like to stand, and we will run through the council affirmation and say the karakia. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, he mā kina ki uta, he mā taratara ki tai, ehi akia nā te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hohu, tihei, mauri ora. Let us affirm today that we as councillors will work together to serve the citizens of Selwyn District, to always use our gifts of understanding, courage, common sense, wisdom and integrity in all our decisions, discussions, dealings and decisions, so that we may solve problems effectively. May we always recognise each other's values and opinions, be fair-minded and ready to listen to each other's point of view. In our dealings with each other, let us always be open to the truth of others and ready to seek agreement, slow to take offence and always prepared to forgive. May we always work to enhance the well-being of the Selwyn District and its communities. We will. Thanks, everyone. So today is our deliberations for the annual plan 23-24, and I want to start by saying thank you to those that have done all the work in the background to get us to the draft, have submitted on our draft, met us here in person, and today is the chance to consider those submissions and think about decisions for next year. We have apologies this morning from Bob, and I think Elizabeth is joining us online. I'll move that we accept those apologies as seconder. Thanks, Shane. Identification of any extraordinary business. There's none that's been raised. This meeting's not for things that are outside of the annual plan process. And are there any sorry, Deborah? Conflicts of interest, yeah. What are they for, Deborah?
And I think
Deborah, can you, those are the two that you identified during the hearings. Okay, thank you. Today has been set out so that there's a consideration of item subject by subject rather than submission by submission, because many of the submissions covered the same topic. Today's a chance to run through the topics and think about how we make decisions for those. Yeah, Nicole?
So we confirm the minutes?
Yeah, we will. Yeah. We'll confirm the minutes once we get there. Sorry, I'm just running through what today will look like. Yeah. Okay. As we move through today, so it's going to be topic by topic, and then we'll see at the end if we have captured all the things that people wanted us to have met. We do have the minutes from the 8th of May. Do have a mover and seconder for those minutes? Malcolm, thank you, Deborah. Great. And Nicole, you had some comments on them? Just microphone, Nicole.
Just trying to find, sorry, I'm just trying to find the page, and it actually just relates to when Malcolm, Deborah and I left the room. We actually came back in the room after, it's not written that, it said we went out, but it's not written that we came back, and it was after Alex Booker finished talking. So after submission 97, we came back into the room.
Cool, thank you. That can be noted. Great. Will that change anything further? All those in favour say aye. Anyone against? Declare it carries. And before we move into the items, just say thanks to the staff who've changed this room round. It's great to be trialling something different and following the discussions around how the public interact with councillors in the space, and to help public feel welcome here and having a concierge opportunity as well for future meetings. Yeah, looking forward to seeing how the flow of this works, and if there's feedback that councillors have or staff have around the current setup, please let David or I know. David, do you have any introductory comments you'd like to make?
No, I don't. Just to reiterate your comments, firstly, thanking all of those staff members who have been working diligently behind the scenes for the logistics for today. And also just acknowledge the submitters, Mr. Mayor, through our annual plan process. Good, positive comments that were received, and I think that will make it a somewhat clearer process today for us to work through.
Right, thank you. So if we could have the recommendations on the screen as we move through. The first one looks at rating, and I just wonder whether this one we do at the end, so that if there's discussions that change where that rating sits, we'll know that, rather than locking ourselves into that right at the beginning before we move through each of the items. So Melbourne Recycling is the first one that's here. The amount of discussion today will just depend on what people want to raise. Generally, we've gone around the room because there's a number of items here and everyone just gets a chance to be the first speaker on each thing. I'm not sure that everybody needs to speak on all of these items, so we'll just see how the flow of this morning goes, and we can change it up if we need to. So around Melbourne Recycling, that we acknowledge the submission, and we know that the budget's been included in the draft annual plan to trial recycling options for improved access to recycling in Melbourne during 23-24. What are councillors' thoughts on that? Does anyone want to speak to or against that being our decision? Lydia.
I speak in support of the trial recycling. It's well needed in our rural communities, and I think it'll be well used. And if we don't trial it, we don't know. So I hope it's successful, and we can further on from there.
So Lydia, you're happy to move that be our recommendation? Cool, thank you. Sophie, happy to second that? Do you want to speak to it, Sophie?
No, just that anything that improves recycling and less dumping is a good thing.
Cool, thank you. Any other conversation on that matter? All those in favour say aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. The next item is public transport. That we acknowledge the submissions received and notes that staff will continue to investigate the development of further infrastructure to support the use of public transport, e.g. park and ride. That we ask staff to continue to work with ECAN on the provision of more direct and express bus services. Note that additionally, the Greater Christchurch Partnership is working towards how to advance and fund the additional services and infrastructure needed. Note that that the Mass Rapid Transit and spatial planning processes are currently underway, those A, B, C and D. Is there a mover and seconder for that being our direction? Malcolm, thank you. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Phil. Is there any conversation on that? And Phil?
Yeah, just the point that we made over the last few meetings is obviously around the Greater Christchurch Partnership, and trying to make sure that the process on that is being the pressure on it, and it gives us a great opportunity to just reiterate that again. Keep the pressure on, keep the pressure on, keep the pressure on.
Cool, thank you. Nicole?
My way service included as well, please. Just got more direct and express bus services.
Right, well, my way, which is really the continuation to ask ECAN to provide that service. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll provide a service, and we don't have that at all.
Cool, you can add that into B. Grant?
Is there an opportunity to, maybe about tilting at windmills, to have a discussion around the e-buses that we noted at Global Bus Ventures
Yeah.
in the annual plans, just noting that we support the transition?
And have that noted in here around what we're talking to ECAN about?
Well, I'm just seeking direction from the mayor, from the CE, I suppose, whether there's any point putting it in there. Is it helpful to you as an advocate when you go to talk to ECAN, Sam? You've already been and talked to about it.
Absolutely an advantage to us to do that, Grant. Yeah.
All right.
We could have locally procured. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whole of life and localism. There you go.
Nice. Very good.
So just the wording that we put in there. Sorry, Grant, you had some that was just then, but if we add, so we added my way. If we have greater emphasis on locally procured. Yeah. Microphone, sorry. Yeah.
Encourages decarbonisation of public transport, whether by electricity or hydrogen or alternative, whatever it is, and seeks whole of life procurement policies and localism consideration.
Cool. Have you got that, Naomi and Therese? It was recorded too, so we can capture that. Thank you, Grant. Deborah?
Just following on from Grant, where it talks about mass rapid transit and spatial planning processes, just with regards to mass rapid transit, is it possible to actually acknowledge that we do have what's termed a rail corridor available with regards to an extension from Hornby through to Rolleston, looking at rapid transport?
So that is part of the MRT discussion so far. It included heavy rail analysis, as well as motorway running and third option too. So that is MRT includes the use of future heavy rail.
I wasn't talking necessarily future rail. Is there an opportunity, given that there is a rail corridor itself, that that rail corridor could be used for mass rapid transport separate from the heavy, if it's going to be really complex to actually do that to service Rolleston?
Yes, but if we're getting into what we're going to advocate to weekend for, and it sits outside of the work that we're currently doing, that doesn't really fit into our own annual plan process. So just thinking about that is already included in the MRT work. That's why we're doing the MRT project at the moment. And you're asking us to continue to advocate to weekend, which is what this discussion is around any future work. I think that's included in what MRT.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah. Acknowledges that currently.
Yeah. Is there anything further, councillors, on that? It was moved and seconded. All those in favour say aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. The next item is roading improvements. And that council acknowledge the submission received and note that a comprehensive review of roading priorities will occur through the formation of council's long-term plan. So mover and seconder for that, Malcolm, and seconder Shane. Any discussion on this item?
Sorry.
Deborah.
Just one. I know we are advancing 150k for footpaths and then 10k for lowering the road speed signs. Just with regards to our budget, how much are we behind in our budget with regards to roading, and does this actually impact on our ability to actually undertake those projects?
So those are questions that we will note, Deborah. We don't have that information at our fingertips at the moment. So we'll note those and report them through the Transport Committee when it makes, when's that, Murray? Another couple of weeks.
21st.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Deborah. Nicole.
Just wondering with how we're going through today, just to clarify. So we're going through these recommendations and approving those. Are we actually going to be going through any of the individual ones, or is this going to be us finished? I just want clarification on how we're doing.
We'll be going through each of the subjects. So this way that we're going through now means that many submitters' subjects are all caught in the same decision.
Yeah, I understand that.
And then if there's others at the end that you feel haven't been caught by the decisions that have been made, then we can look at those submissions and make sure we have made those answers.
Okay, thank you.
Grant.
Similar vein, just want to be clear what we're doing. So we're just voting on roading improvements, and you're going to bring up cycleways, footpaths.
Cycleways is next, and then
Yeah,
footpaths
okay,
after
so
that.
just, yep, so that's right. Our pages don't line up with what's on the screen. It's a wee bit challenging.
Slowly.
Yeah, if we need to take a break at any time and make sure we're all on the same page, we'll do that. So this is just roading. Next up will be cycle paths, cycleways and footpaths. So we had a mover and seconder for this. All those in favour say aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. Next is cycleways. And the recommendation that we acknowledge and receive the submission. Thanks, Grant. Thanks, Sophie. Any discussion on that? All those in favour say aye. Aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. The next item is footpaths, and after that will be speed management. So on footpaths, we acknowledge the submissions received and note that staff recommends council create a fund for discretionary footpath extension. I think we should put a dollar figure in there so that we're approving the amount that that's going to be. I don't know if there's what the advice needs to be there, David or Murray, but let's be specific about what we're approving. Sophie?
Yeah, so it mentions in the notes 150,000, I believe. But I was just so the information says, speaks about providing short lengths at key locations to improve connectivity. That's absolutely happy to support, move it, and all that sort of thing. I'm just wondering if we can clarify, does that include adding more islands across busy roads and cut downs to allow people to access things like bus stops that are currently sitting in the middle of grass or footpaths that don't go to anywhere?
So I'll get Murray to speak to that, but you're right, the figure that we're talking about is 150k. Murray, have you got any comments about the islands?
A lot of those cut downs and islands and that can be done at a low cost, low risk. It's just a matter of prioritising the work. Over the years, we've had around about 400,000 of footpath extensions. I think we took that down during COVID to $300,000. I'm just not 100% sure what the total sum is, but it's generally for connecting bits that don't connect well at the moment. And that's probably been the highest priority for the last 3 or 4 years. Is just rather than extending footpath both sides of the road, it's just making sure that the ones we've got are actually in the right place. Yeah.
Thank you, Mary.
I think we need some real clarity on this. For the newer councillors, this fund was significantly increased a number of years ago, and I guess I'd like to know the budget numbers. And I think the 400,000 you're speaking of, Murray, sounds familiar to me, but I'm not certain from what I'm seeing here. Is the 400,000 annually for discretionary footpath extensions, or is that the total footpath renewal budget? Because if it's just renew extensions, 400,000 goes a long way. And the feedback I get from our community, particularly around the renewals program, is it appears that at times we dig up a lot of perfectly good footpath rather than doing extensions and upgrades where they're needed, and perhaps we could sweat the asset a bit longer in some places and make our extensions through that budget. So I see, Murray, you've got your hand up there. You might be able to clarify that.
Yeah, two completely different topics. The footpath extension was really, and it was one-way council provided a bit of equity around the district by providing roading funds for particularly smaller communities on footpath extensions. The rehab that you're talking about, the renewals, are maintenance, comes out of effectively the depreciation on our footpath asset, and it's they are inspected every year, and then the key ones are actually upgraded. So there's always a wee bit of dispute as to whether people think they're in good condition or not. But that's what our road inspectors go out and prioritise. So two separate functions. One is maintenance renewals of existing footpaths. The other one is extensions and connecting the dots on others.
So our extensions budget is currently 400k and proposing to go to 550.
I'm just going to check with UA actually as to what the
400k of footpaths and so on every year is a lot of footpath.
I can't tell you.
Are there any other questions? Murray, before you go, can we just get any other questions on this, and then we'll come back to this item? Is there anything else that people want to ask, Murray? Deborah?
We had a submission from Vidico Park with regards to having an extension of a footpath to connect up with the bus services at Lincoln University. And just wondering where that project would sit in with regards to a completion date put on the long-term plan to actually manage that situation.
So today, this decision is saying that there'll be a discretionary footpath extension fund approved. The actual, how that will be allocated and where it will be used will be a matter that staff will determine.
That's why earlier I questioned 150,000 with regards to, we're putting it in, but where are those extensions going to go? What's the priority between townships and our smaller rural communities? A bit like our street lighting, so.
So there'd be a report back to your committee following, if we approve this budget, then there'll be an ongoing report back on this item to the committees where they fit, and footpath extensions would, I think, sit within your committee.
Right.
Any further questions on this piece? Phil?
Yeah, picking up on some of the things that have been said. Obviously, Kerwee made had a submission. We know that the Rockland Residents Association have got a submission. Really interested to know what the whether they're specifically this is designed specifically for them. And I guess in terms of what Deborah was saying around the philosophy about how we do things, I guess that's up to your committee to work out what that philosophy is and to take it on the journey. So we all work out what the philosophy is about rural, urban. It's a really good reminder that how important those committees are, and important the chairs of those committees are. Sorry, I'm getting off my soapbox now. The question is about just trying to make sure that question is that 150 targeted at the things that Kerwee was talking about, or is it something that staff will determine later?
Oh, thank you, Murray. We'll come back to you on that. Shane?
Tēnā rā tātou katoa. Mihi to you, Sam. Thank you for the karakia to our staff, acknowledging all of the work that's gone into it, submitters and our community councillors. The question, Murray, is the $150,000 budget that we may approve today that council create the fund for discretionary footpath extension. Does that address the submitters' questions within the report?
Cool.
So
I think that
already
covers all the questions. Murray, you got 2 or 3 there?
Look, I just checked with UA. Previously, up to 3 years ago, we did have $400,000 a year for footpath extensions. We reduced that 300 the first 2 years of this long-term plan. There was nothing in the budget for this year for that 23-24. So putting back 150K into that program. And I think the best way to deal with this is probably, as Councillor Dean has expressed, is that we get a lot of requests and we go back to the community seeking information on what they would like to see in footpath. Better to actually do that and report back through the Transport and Infrastructure Committee on priorities, rather than just hand out the funding based on a couple of submissions from one community, because they won't necessarily be the priority for it. The one like Kerwee, we will have to have some discussions around the state highway as well, as to how that all fits in. So, but it's a wee bit like those roading projects. It's best to say, here's a sum of money. This is what we'll prioritise. We'll come back to the relevant committee, and you can make, and the full council better make the decision then, after the investigation is done on terms of the priority order. If that's okay.
Thank you. That's good. Shane, you can answer your question.
Yes.
Great.
Thank you.
Nicole.
Yeah, I think just got to keep in mind, and need to be worried about this, make sure we keep this footpath, not kitty, but budget is to being a reasonable amount. And it's good to hear that's what we're adjusting, because I think you need to go further back on how we originally had a footpath budget, which was 50K a year. And I know this because this is when I was chairing the Rolleston Residents Association. This is when it was increased, and it was supposed to be doubled. And then we said it actually needed to be doubled more than that. And the council took it up to 400,000 because there was 17-year backlog on footpath projects, which meant that there wasn't anything else added to that because it was pointless of putting anything extra on it because it was never going to get done. So we need to keep that in mind, and particularly with looking through the committee, and it's good that Phil's pointed out with Sid, it's Deborah and Sophie's committee, that they really need to make sure that we keep on top of this, because this is actually accessibility for our more vulnerable people in our community, is to have footpaths. And I would like confirmation as well on Sophie's question about actually getting across roads, having cut downs. If that's part of it as well, we need to keep that mindful, because we are sadly lacking in those areas, and we need to up the game on that. So thank you.
Murray, do you want to just confirm about where it can be used, or what the intention is for this money to be used?
I think we'll come back to the committee with how that 150 will be spent after the staff had a chance to prioritise. The changes in the way people travel and things like cut downs and curb extensions and islands changing all the time, so we have to prioritise. And if we can get money out of low cost, low risk project as well to supplement that, we'll look at that as well. But again, we'll come back to the Transport Infrastructure Committee.
So the previous decisions going from 400 to 300 for a couple of years down to zero, is that just because we didn't want to put rates up? That's not a reflection of that there's no more work to be done. Councillor
Reid is quite correct that we went from 50 to 400 because we weren't making a dent in the backlog of requests. It went down to 300 because of a COVID decision from council to reduce rates at that point. I'm not sure when the decision was made not to have zero in this year's and coming annual plan, but that's something I'll look at as well.
So 150 is a start, but it might not actually be sufficient to continue the level of work that we have required.
And Your Worship, I would suggest then it's a good LTP to discussion to determine what the investment level needs to be moving forward.
Thank you. Grant.
It would be helpful for us. Is there a rule of thumb? Is it $500 a metre, or how many metres do we get for 150,000? Is there a rule of thumb that you might be able to tell us?
What we do is when we're looking at the program, we obviously estimate the cost and they go out to tender and then we get the real cost. But fairly accurate footpath, that's getting down into detail at the moment. We can probably provide that information to the committee of what our expectation of how far that will go.
I think my recollection of the 400,000 was that it did a really good job in a really short period of time. And actually got to the stage where some communities were going, why are you putting a footpath there? Because it seemed like we'd overshot the moon and we'd actually done too good a job. And so I think I didn't realise that we got back to zero, but certainly we'd done a great job of picking up the rats and mice.
Thank you. So we've got 150 is the dollar amount that'll sit in there along with this recommendation. It was moved by Sophie. Is there a seconder for the recommendation? Shane, thank you. All those in favour say aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. The next item is speed management. And then after that, we'll talk about access way maintenance to the Kiwi water supply. So around speed management, council acknowledges the submissions received and staff recommends additional road marking, which is coordinated with the school speed management program, and confirms that council's activity and road safety education continues to be a priority. Malcolm.
There was some discussion about using red banded stripes on the road to identify crossings and areas where people need to slow down. I wonder if is that part of what we're intending to do with this funding?
Murray?
I can't provide that detail.
Certainly it's something we are doing. Yes, Malcolm. In Springs Road particularly.
Nicole?
And it's also be interesting to know, because this is just talking about the schools program, but there's also a program of speed limits that we'll have to be doing going forward. And I just wonder the time frame on that. It was alluded to in here, but I'll just
Your Worship, our speed management plan has to be basically prepared by October this year, and then that will go through for ratification. And that will have a consequence in terms of future year budgets.
Thank you. Shane?
Just regarding schools, can I remind managers that at least in primary schools still awaits speed reduction program and infrastructure improvement for drop-offs on the side that's been committed to, but still hasn't been attained after the 3 years. Thank you.
So I've just sort of followed up that sort of question. We've got the school speed management program. Where does that get reported back to? And is that the transport and infrastructure group? So that could be caught up.
Yeah,
Shane, that sort of reporting
you'll
back there.
you'll find that in the operational delivery portion of that committee, there's been quite a comprehensive commentary on road safety initiatives. So that's where it will be.
Cool. Thank you. Do we have a mover and seconder for that? I think it was Malcolm and Shane, was it? Yeah. Any further discussion? All those in favour say aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. We'll now talk about accessway maintenance to the Kirby water supply, which will be followed by water quality. So the discussion around the Kirby. I've missed one. Thank you.
It's Sam, this is probably covered twice within the dark skies also.
Within the dark sky.
Yeah.
Yep. If it doesn't get covered, let's do it individually later, Nicole. But if it comes up as part of the Castle Hill piece, we'll do it then.
Sam?
Yeah.
Why can't we deal with it now? Because while it's been considered as part of the 2024 34 long-term plan for Castle Hill for the dark sky, can we not acknowledge that it comes under our street lighting program, and the council will be, while it's saying that there's no financial impact on the draft annual budget for next year, if there's any consultation that's required, that will actually, with the community, that would be a cost that probably needs to be in there with regards to what satisfactory is the street lighting for encouraging dark skies in our rural areas. Te Awamutu is another one wanting a dark sky. Te Awamutu is wanting a dark sky as well.
Yeah,
Speaking to
Deborah, I agree. I just wonder whether it is what dark sky accreditation means is clearly understood. Firstly, within the community that we got a lot of submissions for, but secondly, what the implications are district wide. So I think that the answer is more that we investigate and report back on implications of dark sky accreditation.
But if we don't have a budget for it, and we want to do it, and we're pushing it out to a 2024-2034 long-term plan, right? Because we actually do have street lighting that's probably, from a lot of people's perspective, interfering with the dark sky. Surely we need to put some sort of budget in with regards to that particular program now.
speaking to that point, there is later on in the pack when we get through to the community services and facilities, we talk to the dark sky accreditation, and so the order that you'd need to run on this would be to investigate what accreditation means, as David said, what would require to get it, and then what you would need to do from an infrastructure point of view to deliver it. In terms of consultation, you'd be right at the very back end of the financial year we're talking about before you'd even get near that point once you've done the investigations, and the investigations would be managed internally.
Shane?
Thank you, Sam. Just while we're talking about dark sky and reducing light, it would require communities still require a light at the end of their cul-de-sac. So if there's a spare light going, they would still appreciate a light. Thank you.
I think we've gone deep enough into dark sky accreditation for us to think about that as part of the Castle Hill stuff. Let's talk about Castle Hill altogether rather than pulling that out now. And a particular single light won't be a matter that we'll determine here. So access way maintenance to the Kiwi water supply reservoir, and the street lighting piece gets caught up later. So the council acknowledges the submission received and note that staff recommends council negotiates cost sharing agreement to upgrade the accessway which services both reservoir and Kiwi Hall. Great, Grant, Sophie, all those in favour say aye. Aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. Water quality has come through as a note, and here we're just acknowledging that there's been submissions received. We're not changing direction through the annual plan process. Mover and seconder. Thank you, Phil. Seconded. Shane, thank you. Although any discussion? All those in favour say aye.
Sorry, Sam, I just noted not about water quality, but there was a concern about water pressure. I wasn't here for that submission. Is that something that can be solved engineering, or is it an ongoing issue, Murray? That just
without looking back at the specific issue, generally across the district we're pretty good, but in the peak of summer on a Sunday night at 6 or 7 o'clock, it's self-regulating. If everybody wants the water at the same time, our water pressure drops. But it's not. We generally meet our standards in terms of, I think it's 35, 350. Yeah, 350, pretty consistently. So not a significant issue, but we've still got that issue of 70 or 80% of our water in summer being used to irrigate lawns.
Thank you. The next item, I'm going to pull dark sky accreditation into the conversation around Castle Hill Village. So we'll come to that. Then we've got provision, service provision and facilities. So that council acknowledges submissions received and notes that the network of facilities is continuously analysed to ensure the needs of communities are met and accessibility is considered throughout the district, and agree that the construction, acquisition and leasing of new facilities will be matters that the long-term plan will determine.
And the key recommendation is the recommendation B. This will be a significant part of LTP discussions, Mr. Mayor.
And we're going to talk about Prebleton as the next item, so we don't need to catch Prebleton, and here will be a separate discussion on Prebleton. Move and seconder for that direction. Sophie, thank you. Seconder. Lydia, thank you. All those in favour say aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. Can I just ask about the outcome then? That decision means that new facilities or the closure of facilities isn't going to be an item that will come as a paper to a council meeting, but will be considered as part of the whole for the long-term plan?
Yeah. That's correct.
One.
Yeah, well, I guess that's what I'm asking. So we've got Whatu Ora, we've got Prebleton we're going to discuss now. There's individual things that are kind of in front of us at the moment, but this is saying, please give us some overall context for any decision on a facility rather than dealing with a decision on a facility by facility basis.
There is some work underway, council, or at least initially the committee, Community Services Committee is expecting to receive the strategic play, recreation and sports strategy later on this year, and it will touch on some of the opportunities for facility. So there will be reports that council received, but there will be no cost implications other than what gets fed into the long-term plan considerations. So you won't be looking at budget decisions or your cost decisions outside of the LTP process. They'll be being directed into that LTP process.
Thank you. Phil?
I guess, I just wanted to clarify what you just said. So it will come back as the LTP planning.
Yes.
Does that mean that it won't go back to the committee in terms of deciding the philosophies behind how we service our communities and the underwriting, thinking behind it all? Surely the committee is a better place for that than the LTP plan. The LTP should be reflecting what the committees are doing as opposed to the other way around.
Well, and the committees will be building a lot of what happens for the LTP discussion.
That doesn't limit it. It doesn't say it's not going to go back there, because that's, I see where those sorts of decisions get made.
Yep. Colin, do you have anything else to add to that?
No.
Yep. Next is Prebleton Community Facility, and then we'll deal with Castle Hill. So Prebleton Community Facility, we acknowledge the submission received and note the provision for this facility is included in the current LTP where construction was planned for 25-26. B, acknowledge the additional planning and assessment work to be needed to define the project and confirm the location that we considered as part of the 24-34 long-term plan. And acknowledge that there has been significant changes in growth and demand in Prebleton. This will impact the scope and requirement of the facility, and building cost escalations are likely to impact budget and funding requirements.
Mayor,
Yes,
I'm quite happy to move A, but not B and C. And the reason why not B is because it's been quite clear in all the correspondence for many years since 2019 that consultation on this project would happen in 2023 with the community. And that's what the submissions actually highlighted. When is the consultation going to be revisited after 2019 report and an earlier report with regards to consultation with the community? And I acknowledge that there has been growth, but the lead-in time for consultation may give it the opportunity to actually be looked at in 2025-26 for construction. The way that you've actually worded B, if it's going to be part of the 2024 34 LPT for information, actually pushes it out of our last LTP process and allows all of our community facilities that are being proposed in that 10-year budget to be up for grabs or reconsultation. And that's why I will not be agreeing to B, and I will not be, and while I acknowledge I will not be agreeing to C, because both of them are pushing that consultation out that we quite clearly have communicated to the community committees within the community, correspondence, and it's only consultation, right? It's understanding the community's viewpoint, and it has changed significantly. And there may be assets that can actually contribute to this project. So that's why I would like to see the consultation actually happen this year, because it takes at least 12 months for consultation with the community. And you always have a change within the community. But as I said, the way that you've written it there, you're saying that consultation is going to be pushed out to 2024 to 34, and that is not what we have told the community.
Deborah, I think you're reading that wrong. I think that what this recommendation says is that we will be doing it as part of the long-term plan formation, which means we have to have done the work with the community before we get to what our draft long-term plan looks like to understand what we're going to put in the draft long-term plan. It says LTP formation there, which means it needs to happen in 23-24 for the work to go ahead. And if we don't end up changing it as a part of that work, we'll be limiting ourselves to the existing budget. We'll build a too small facility and we won't be able to think about what Prebleton really needs going forward. So if you don't include B, you're not going to get any new work done in the next 12 months that will actually possibly increase the budget to have a fit for purpose facility. And if we don't do C, then C is really commentary, but it does actually say that we acknowledge that there's going to need to be some change from where we were 3 years ago.
Okay, is there an opportunity to acknowledge then that in the 2023-24 budget, consultation with the community, as we've actually assured them for several years, and they've got all the correspondence, they're very good at collecting information with regards to what's been assured of them in that recommendation, please. And I'll actually move that as a recommendation that we actually add a D and we acknowledge that consultation with the community will occur in the 2023-24 budget process.
So LTP formation is the words that's currently there, and that has to happen in the 23-24 year. So that does it not include what you're requesting?
I just want it quite clearly put in there for 2023-24 because it's so easy to actually have a recommendation and then somebody turn up and say, oh no, it's part of the 2024-2034.
I go back to Sam's comment. It's the way you're reading it. So it's around LTP formation. The only way we can form our view to go into the LTP is to have that community consultation in the first instance. That's a process that's very clearly understood by staff.
And that will be local to understand what the need is, what the desire is. But then the actual consultation with the Selwyn community around what are we building in the next 12 years, that's where the LTP kicks in and why 34 is so important as a date. So the local stuff will happen ahead of that and the district-wide conversation happens as part of the long-term plan.
As long as it's recorded in the minutes, so it can be referred back to this conversation.
The recommendation records that as the direction. Malcolm?
Yes, thank you, Sam. I'm quite disappointed that I've got a councillor from outside of a community she doesn't live in who deals with a very small subset of the population in that community, speaking on its behalf. This community is growing exponentially. Yes, we did say we were going to consult on a hall. And if we had, as you have quite correctly said, Mr. Mayor, we would have had a building that was not fit for purpose. This community is due to grow by maybe 4,000 people, depending on the outcome of 3 private plan changes. I also put into question the report that we did some years ago around the network of community halls and structures and where we needed them. It is an old report, and I think that we probably need to revisit where we are going in light of the larger population we've got and the ramifications for that population. I'm very concerned that a small subset of people are speaking on behalf or trying to speak on behalf of 5,500 people at the moment, when it is not necessarily the view of those 5,000 people. I'm also concerned as to what is the real need for a community structure in the community, how big it is, and what it contains. We have looked at a hub that could be used for civil defence in the past. Hence, I do think we need to take our time in the LTP, and I'm not interested in seeing something rushed in the 23-24 year for consultation, because quite frankly, the outcome of the future growth of the community will not be made available to us by then. And also, those within the community need to have that conversation.
Thanks, Malcolm. Sophie?
I was just going to suggest that in B, perhaps for the sake of clarity for anybody else reading this, to have assessment work will be needed in 23-24 to define the project, just to clarify when that's happening. Just a simple couple extra words, and wanting to support Malcolm in some ways as well. I mean, a bit like when we were talking about the GCP spatial plan stuff, we're looking at much bigger numbers. I'm sure there are a lot of people in Prebbleton who do not wish it to go beyond 5,500, but it is extremely likely. So, you know, as whatever sort of numbers the planning team have that it is likely to get to, that's what we have to plan for.
Thanks, Sophie. And if those words would add clarity, Deborah, to what your recommendation is, I can see 23-24 and it says what we're going to do anyway. Denise, do you have?
Just really around a point of clarification for the staff's benefit. I'm wondering if Councillor Hesson has a very specific model for consultation that she's wanting us to follow in terms of what is deemed to be consultation, because from our point of view, I've got staff already that are actively engaged in conversations in and around Prebbleton, around the Kakaha Park, and also forming relationships with the various sports clubs that are using facilities there and around Lincoln University, etc. So the intent is that we use the information from that active engagement. And I'm not saying that's the extent of it. I'm just saying our approach may be different to what Councillor Hesson's expectations are, that we would, as part of our business as usual, be trying to gather information about what a future build may need to look like. That might be different potentially than what it was originally intended to do. So just, I guess, if Councillor Hesson has a very formed or fixed view about what consultation needs to look like to satisfy her. It would be useful to understand that now, because that's not necessarily how we're proceeding.
To follow on from you, I'm actually a councillor that goes to the Prebbleton Hall Incorporated Society. And with regards to discussions with the current committee, which is a community facility which is owned, it would be fair to say that there has been a mind shift with regards to the current hall committee with regards to that particular asset that needs to be explored. I know it was explored when Mr. Marshall was here, and there was exchange of correspondence with regards to that incorporated society. And I think that it would be very helpful if council could make contact with that committee and sit down and share the information that they have and their thoughts.
Okay.
Given, yeah,
Great. We're going real deep into a project that's still got a couple of years to go. So let's take that on board, Deborah. Thank you for that. And Denise, you've heard that. There'll also be much wider community consultation with the stakeholders that you're already dealing with. There'll be some Prebbleton specific work done in the next 12 months, and then full sell and consultation through the long-term plan. Great. So Deborah, are you happy to move A, B and C, and we've added the words in 23-24 after in B, acknowledge that additional planning and assessment work will be needed in 23-24, that's added, to define the project, yada yada. Malcolm, happy to move that? Deborah, second? Yep, cool. Any further discussion? All those in favour say aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. So we'll deal with Castle Hill now, and the next one is provision of amenities and facilities for parks and reserves. And with Castle Hill, we're also touching on Dark Sky. So we'll have those discussed now. For Castle Hill, we acknowledge the submissions received and recommends a community hall extension at Castle Hill Village be deferred to 24-25 to allow for additional budget. The current budget will be carried forward to the state, and we need that to be considered as part of the long-term plan formation. B, we acknowledge at this stage the total cost of the hall extension project above the current budget has not been determined, and design and construction plans are yet to be prepared. But C acknowledges that design work is underway for the hall extension and will enable a revised cost estimate to be prepared. D, agree with the staff recommendation that existing budget for the resurfacing of the tennis courts at Castle Hill is carried forward to 23-24 and agree to an additional budget of 66 to meet the shortfall. Lydia.
I guess I've got a couple of questions around the hall. I'm doing a bit of research on it. It looks like it was identified in 2021. They were going to get an extension. And I'm just wondering why the design work wasn't done then, because all the floors been strengthened and there's been work done on the building. So why is it constantly being pushed off? This hall is, the max occupancy is 50. And they're currently exceeding that quite often. And that can be every weekend. They've got a continuous stream of visitors and events happening. And, you know, this facility, if we have an AFA issue, potentially you're looking at having to host quite an amount of people there. So, yeah, I guess I just want to know why it's consistently being pushed back.
David?
Yeah, happy to talk to this one. So this request, along with a lot of those Castle Hill submissions, came out of the visit that you and I and the board were on in late February. And the key recommendation here is recommendation C, acknowledges that design work is underway. So the community have talked about adding 2 additional bays to the hall. They're looking at maximum occupancy. They raised it on the day of 99. And also combining the wastewater system. So there's an outside toilet and an inside toilet, which go in different directions. So that's all part of that as well. So that is currently underway. So this recommendation simply acknowledges that work is happening and will continue.
So we will see construction around 24-25.
We will see construction after a report comes back to council on the cost of that facility and the timing of that as well, to make sure that it can be done within the budget that's been allocated for it.
Deborah.
Just with regards to this extension, do we collect development contributions from Castle Hill? And if this is an extension, is it not a capital work that can be charged against the DC account?
Kelvin.
It will be growth related. There is some growth in Castle Hill, but it's not massive growth. So you're certainly not going to raise the funds there, and it's proportional funding anyway. So if the budget's over, the DC contribution will be up, and so will the ratepayer contribution be up. I haven't got the numbers at hand as to what we're holding.
Just with regards to that, we now collect DCs on a ward basis. So just curious with regards to, is there a possibility of tapping into that ward DC for this particular project?
It all comes back again to whether it's increased level of service or increased demand driving. If it's increased demand, then yes, the DCs. If it's increased service provision, then it's ratepayer favored.
Thank you. Grant.
Similar line of good question, Deborah. So I think there was just a recent consent renewal on the property across the road around the campground at Castle Hill. So I'm assuming that there'll be some DCs out of that or reserve contributions which could be put towards that.
If it's a consent renewal, then no, there won't be, because it's not a new demand.
We would have collected them at some stage.
Yeah, so it would have been depending on when the original consent occurred. So it may be.
Sometimes the consent will be issued, but it's not until subdivision they collect the.
Sam, I'm a bit uncomfortable here. This has been part of the district plan hearing.
If you want to declare an interest and leave, you can.
I will, yeah.
Yep.
I'll finish that subject then, Karen, rather than leaving the table. But one of the things that would be helpful for us is to actually quantify the demand that the residents are saying through the usage hireage figures from Denise's team. So I don't think we're quantifying saying, is it really backed up by actual usage figures? And what it doesn't say here is what the budget is for the tennis court. It just says add another 66,000 on top. Well, what's the original budget? Yes, I raised that because in isolation, it sounds that's a good idea. Why don't we resurface the tennis court at Castle Hill? But you've got a whole swag of tennis courts all around Selwyn who are asking the same question. So just be careful. We've got a policy here. Are we following the policy around resurfacing and the scheduling of resurfacing the tennis courts? Otherwise, you're in danger of cherry picking and just doing bits here and bits there as people submit. I'm sure the team must have an asset management plan around resurfacing times and when it's due to be done and how it fits into that schedule.
So in terms of the demand for the facility, it is quite significant. It was built for a different community that's there at the moment, and the size of that community has doubled. So it's not unreasonable, given the use not only from the local residents but external hireage for that facility as well. In terms of the tennis court grant, the original budget was 30,000. And the quote that we received, and we've sought other quotes, but this quote that we received requires an additional 66 to be spent. Again, it is a facility that is used quite well. I acknowledge there's a lot of tennis courts that appear empty at times, but this one does get good use.
I'm not saying they appear empty. All I'm saying is there's a lot of tennis clubs and tennis facilities which will be asking the same question. And if this is the standard or precedent that you just submit to an annual plan and get budget for it, let's say that openly. But I was of the understanding we had an asset management plan and we were going to work our way through it.
So this was
actually programmed works grant, and programmed works to be done in the 22-23 year. And it's been delayed because we need additional funding to pursue it.
So, David, it does fit within the plan of council to upgrade scheduled facilities. Great. Phil?
I have some problems with it in terms of why just this hall, because these people came along and made a submission to the in your plan. We've got a big list of community assets and halls all around the place that we talk about all the time. And a lot of them need work. So a gang of 24 people out of 40 who live in that community decided to make a submission. I don't think that it's a fairly representative group to reflect anything in your plan without considering the other 89,600 people within our community. So I'll be voting against it.
So just to
Maybe
remind
we'll
councillors, this is actually planned work. And there is 220,000, I think, it's been set aside for a two-part project. The first one was strengthening of the building, which has been completed. And the second one was extension of the size of the building. So again, as I say, it comes back to number C, acknowledging the design work's underway. So it's not new work, it's planned work continuing.
So to just clarify, so
these were projects that were already consulted on, already going to happen. And because of budget shortfall, there's another consideration for the conversation here now.
And that's what the submissions are about, just to reaffirm the desire for the community for us to continue on with those planned projects.
If I can just jump in, I still maintain my comment is that there are a lot of halls, and picking up on what Councillor Miller was saying as well, there are lots of tennis courts, there are lots of halls. Everyone that's got their hand out with money. We saw Kerwee and this community come to us, and we've representing their needs in here. I don't think that this community, which is very, very small, should have got but you're saying it's existing work, so I just stand up.
Thanks, Phil. Murray?
Yeah, interesting points. All halls, outside facilities and any other assets that were owned by council have asset management plans, and they have renewal programs and they have budgets. What's happened in Castle Hill is reflective of that staff did not want to overspend the budgets available and wanted to reconsider the cost of both projects rather than go ahead, reset. I think the community was under the impression that the jobs may have disappeared, rather than that they were being held back to get more funding. So, and that's probably why we had a significant number of submissions from Castle Hill, because they may have been prompted to submit to ensure that those rebudgeting happened.
Thanks, Murray. Shane?
Yes, can I hear from Mr. Rikers?
What do you want to hear? How good's Rolleston? Was that the question, Phil?
Yeah, I think Murray sort of covered it, but we do have asset plans for all of our community centres and halls across the district. That feeds into the long-term plan. The Castle Hill project was actually part of the previous long-term plan, so it was approved through that process. And as has been said, there wasn't sufficient funding to meet the cost of it. So we're just reviewing that at the moment. The same with tennis courts. So that tennis court at Castle Hill was actually looked at as part of our program. We do condition reports on them every 3 years, and that out of that comes the program of works based on a sort of priority on condition. When they actually started to look at that a little bit more closely, it was clear that the base had never been formed properly. That was done by the original developer that built the tennis court up there. And so there's a bit more work that's needed to be done on it. So that's why there's additional cost with that particular one that we hadn't initially planned for.
Thank you. Sophie?
Yeah, I guess my perspective on it is, as far as the hall goes, that's already been planned. Yes, the village has grown in terms of civil defence and the absolute likelihood of a large earthquake at some point in the next, we don't know when. It just needs to be fit for purpose there. In terms of tennis, it's already planned. They haven't got any other sports facilities. Like, they're surrounded by beautiful conservation land, but we don't help with any of those trails. They maintain it themselves. That's literally between the hall and, in terms of social infrastructure, that's all we have adopted there. And I guess the other part is, if nothing else, this kind of reminds us that if somebody else goes, hey, I've got a really nice high country station that I'd like to subdivide into a village, it would be good to think about the long-term ramifications of that sort of thing. But yeah.
Thanks, Sophie.
I'm for it.
Thanks, Sophie. Lydia?
I would like to move this report, or recommend these. These are works in process, and I wouldn't want to play tennis on the tennis court that's currently there, considering it requires weeding between the gaps that are on the court. So,
Shane, second?
Yes.
Cool. Any further discussion? All those in favour say aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. Dark sky accreditation. This is part of that area as well, but not exclusively there because it's around Tomutu 2. Or possibly Tomutu and Te Wahora. So the recommendation around dark sky accreditation is that we acknowledge the submission received. Staff have put forward that we note staff will consider the pursuit of the accreditation as part of the long-term plan formation. So that will, again, that's the same language as saying over the next 12 months that will be pursued and be put into the long-term plan for funding, whatever that number comes to, because we don't know what that'll be depending on what sort of reserve status that will entail. Grant.
I think there's actually two issues that Castle Hill are bringing to us. One is dark sky accreditation, but one is their immediate desire not to have streetlights there. And my understanding that there's been some issues with them getting up and painting the lights black and taking fuses out themselves. And I talked to Bob, and he told me, I guess, that the lights are off. Are the street lights on or off as we stand at the moment?
I haven't quite got the most up to date, but we removed a lot of street lights off of private right of ways where council was actually paying for the electricity for private assets. So we removed those, and there's still some work to be done to remove them off public roads. But more importantly, we can't just remove street lights from public roads. We have to consider the amenity and safety aspects as well. So the way to do it at Castle Hill would be to apply dimmers and other mechanisms, and that isn't budgeted for at the moment. So it's a bit of a two-stage process. And when we're looking at dark sky accreditation anywhere, particularly around existing lighted areas, we need to consider what the impact of reducing the current lighting is, particularly on an amenity and safety
I guess
asset.
I hear what you're saying. Overwhelmingly, since I've been here, that maybe it's the same portion of the community, and maybe Lydia, who's a local, might know better, but I've heard overwhelming feedback that they want the lights off. I think as an organisation, why don't we be a bit brave and do something unconventional? And here I am again suggesting a trial. Why don't we trial? I think the best time would be in summer when there are extended daylight hours. We just turn the lights off for the summer period from November through to March, and then we have an assessment as to whether it's working okay. I mean, I hear you, Murray. I know you've got obviously from an engineering perspective, but if that's what the community wants up there, overwhelmingly, if it's just a dog, the tail wagging the dog, well, it's a different story.
Can I add just one comment?
Yes,
I mean, it's just the issue with Castle Hill came about through our LED upgrade. And our LED upgrade basically took all of our high pressure sodium lights and actually shifted them to LED. That's fine. In most cases, that actually provides a lot softer, clearer light and less light spill. Unfortunately, the light fittings at Castle Hill were different. And in fact, even though the LED lights actually increased the light than what was there currently, but we had this perverse behaviour in respect to that. And as you know, we've spent quite a bit of time as part of the energy initiative moving to LED. Yes, we're right. We'll have something we can look at anyway further on and get more details about what it would cost and what we need to do. And Councillor Miller's quite right. We could do some trials, but it involves actually switching off circuits and lighting circuits.
The journey for Tekapo on that, or Takapo, was the changing of all of their streetlights, and instead of being, I think they were whatever the numbers were, they're almost a third the brightness that Waka Kotahi was happy to support, and they also lowered a whole lot of the lighting. So now there's not big overhead lights, there's bollard lighting, there's street lighting through the town. So there's a whole lot of options that we could consider around still ensuring that it's safe to walk around at night without affecting the night sky and having light shining into places. So I wonder if we're adding a C in here, we could say investigate Tekapo streetlight profile with Waka
I've got a
Kotahi.
suggestion, Sam. I wonder whether it would be a great project for the Melbourne Community Board to undertake a survey of the residents and understand what that might look like, because it seems to be a great project for them, doesn't it? Well, I don't know. I'm guessing that they could come back to the recommendation before, well, hopefully before summer. The trial could probably start if there's a possibility, but doing nothing in the face of repeated questions about turning it off and sort of vigilante action. I realise the LED lights have made it worse, Murray, but that action was occurring before the LEDs came in. They just didn't want the lights there. And, maybe we should listen to a community, say, well, okay, let's try it.
If we're going to change the lighting, we're going to need to think about budget. I mean, I agree the Melbourne Community has got a good place to pay part to play on that, but I'm not sure they've got the budget to try and, at least we're just saying switch off the lights.
I'm suggesting turn them off for the summer period for 6 months and see, does it work? Is it unsafe?
Yeah.
Does it create problems that we didn't anticipate? And hopefully get Waka Kotahi on board and treat it as a trial. And say, listen, we're deliberate in a trial where the residents are on board, the council's on board, Waka Kotahi's on board. This is only a suggestion. It may not get past first gear, but
So we're not asking the community board then, we're actually telling them.
I just think any community board say, go and survey and see whether the trial would be a good idea. They can approach Waka Kotahi. I'm just suggesting it's a great place to do that. Maybe a better place internally, but it just seems like it would be a lot of place.
Give them some meat.
Thank you. Murray and then Phil.
That can be done, and in some ways it might actually help with the dark sky consideration, because you'll have a bit of a trial, see what it actually looks like.
Thank you. Phil.
So I was going to make another point, but I'm going to pick up on that point first. I think you're right about having an item C there, but also extending the frame of the thinking around this. It's not just the dark sky accreditation, it's what we do with it. So I think it'd be nice in there to have some sort of scoping around what the costs would be as we go forward for other infrastructure that would support the dark sky accreditation. Do we want to create a viewing platforms and things like that? And do we want to have lighting going right from Darfield all the way out there that are consistent with that? And I think they're probably having C in there that just at least allows us to even think about it. Dark sky accreditation is just a status, as opposed to us creating a dark sky accredited area where people can enjoy this magnificent blah blah blah.
Okay. I'm wondering if that fits into saying if D is investigates tourism, trail promotion and destination management is a part of this work. Next we have Nicole.
Haven't staff already looked at about the dark sky accreditation? I mean, we've brought up this has been brought up before a number of times, and I would have thought we should be just looking at a plan and following on from what Phil and Grant said of going forward, and things as you've raised. Obvious things is the lighting and changing that out and looking, obviously Grant's talking about the short term, but in the longer term going forward. But I mean, this has been brought up a few years ago. This is not something new that we're talking about. So where are we actually at, and what next steps have we got? Is there actually some plan? Because this is not just something that's been brought up this year.
So Denise, I don't know if you want to answer that, but B, to me, I agree. We've talked around this a lot. We confirmed at the start of this term we wanted to get this done. We talked to the community a lot about it and we received good support to make it happen. B could actually just say staff will pursue dark sky accreditation in 23-24. That brings it into this, and the work stream might go longer than that, but it gives the direction to your team, Denise, to say, here's a priority, start the work now. And get on with it, rather than at the moment this has put it off for another 12 months and then ask the community again to tell us what they've already told us.
There will be budget implications to that.
Yes.
That's part of It says as part of the long-term, the LTP formation.
Yeah, but what Sam was saying there is we're going for it in the year ahead. So it's not part of the formation of the LTP, we're getting accreditation in 23-24.
So Denise, could you tell us what, if we approve what you've got
Just
as
in,
a recommendation, what does that mean?
well, just in terms of what Councillor Reid, the question that you raised, Councillor Reid, that was specific, the issues and opportunities around the dark sky accreditation were raised at the time of the district plan development to inform the district plan and some of the discussions that were underway and the deliberations that took place around that. At that time, we did some very preliminary work, and there's a lot of it depends and nuances around dark sky, and it can't be there's absolute limits to a complete dark sky process because of some of the businesses and the requirements that they have right across the district. So it's about how can a bespoke dark sky trail be established, and there has been work going on between Rob's team and CSF around, you know, what options does this give us? If in terms of what Kelvin said, we've got no resource to take it forward at this stage and in the annual plan, and it seems reasonable that the long-term plan can pick that up. And we think that an initial piece of work does need to get done by bringing in an expert to work alongside us to get cracking on the accreditation, because there's nowhere there that there's just says, here's the criteria, tick the boxes and you're in. It's much more bespoke than that, and it's much more complex, and so I guess it's a lot more than a tick box exercise, and it will have some cost associated with even investigating some of the complexity that sits within that. So that's why it seems an appropriate place to put it into the LTP. But it's good to get permission to just pursue that as part of that LTP.
Sophie.
Yeah, I guess a lot of the questions I was going to ask have already been answered. But I'm going to support what you said about looking at it more holistically in terms of destination management and everything else, because you've already mentioned Takapul, for instance. So does Castle Hill want everything that comes with this becoming a tourist destination, like, say, a large hotel and Chinese restaurants or any kind of restaurant, and there's limits potentially to what they, it's one thing to think that you would like dark sky accreditation, but actually to make it worthwhile, it needs to be more than just a few Airbnb, bring their own issues in terms of everything else. That's not saying that I don't think it's worth doing. I mean, Waitaki has just achieved UNESCO Geopark status, that's something that you can recognise and international tourists recognise as this is worth going to. Same for dark skies. What I'm worried about is that Castle Hill is excited about something that they haven't actually thought about what that looks like in 10 years' time. Because you don't want people driving. Well, they can't even drive to a stay in Darfield, and you don't want people driving in the middle of the night to wherever their accommodation is. So, yep, thanks.
You got an issue with night driving? No, thanks, Sophie. It's good. Lydia.
I got an issue with people driving in the dark on unfamiliar roads in a mountainous pass.
On frosty nights, yes. Lydia.
I think there's a couple of things here, and that the dark sky accreditation needs to go to the LTP, because it's not just about Castle Hill. There's Tamutu, there's, we're looking at Coleridge, we talk about tourism there. That's sort of a district-wide thing. But I do support, in the meantime, option C of having a trial of turning the lights off at Castle Hill over the summer months. I think that is... at the end of the day, the immediate issue here is the residents don't want the streetlights on. And, maybe we need to listen to that and give them a trial and then survey or consult with them afterwards how it went. And if it is something they want to pursue, then you can gauge a true feeling of how things are, because, having people turn lights off and black them out and put tape over them and is not ideal. And when 23% of our annual plan submissions are from Castle Hill around these issues, I think that we need to listen to them.
Shane.
Thank you. Just to sort of wrap up, I agree and support the comments around the table. And maybe the words will consider the pursuit of need to be more specific, and notes that staff will establish a business case perhaps, and by approving, I'm happy to move the accreditation. By moving the dark sky accreditation, there's obviously a cost with that, and then there's a cost to the infrastructure side of it as well that Murray has already brought up. So while we're happy to establish a win-win-win for everybody at a cultural, environmental, social and economic benefit, what is lawful and what is the cost of that?
So I've just tried to pick up what everyone has said and the direction we'd like to go. And sorry, I haven't got this. I've written it down briefly, but I'll just say it to the room and just see if this feels right for the direction. So A, that we acknowledge the submission received. B, picks up on your point just then, Shane. So notes that staff will provide a dark sky accreditation plan in 23-24 to be implemented in the long-term plan 24-34. And so that says you give us the plan, it'll be reported back through your committee, Denise, and then funding to actually implement will be after that. C includes the investigation to include Takapo streetlight profiles with Waka Kotahi to meet dark sky standards, so that we're specific in that space. D, that tourism, trail, promotion and destination management outcomes are a part of this work, and that's the breadth of the work. And E, request Melbourne Community Board to determine if a trial of no streetlights for the coming summer is necessary. And then that gives the work to the community board. They can make the decision on whether they want to press play or not on that, gives them some decision making and allows them to ask the community, is that actually what you're after in here? Does that cover the breadth of the things that were raised? And I'll give you these words, staff, to capture later.
The only question I've got is if that's to be done as part of the LTP consideration. There's a lot of work that we're not currently resourced for. So you'll also need to add a budget to bring the additional resource in to allow that work to be done in the first instance.
Well, Denise said she's bringing someone to do some of that work ahead.
Yeah, that would be in response to the budget being provided within the LTP. It would cost money
Not in the
to get someone to
LTP,
come in and work with us. The initial proposal would be about bringing that as part of the LTP. If you want to bring that forward, it will cost money, as David said.
So what value is that?
I'm not sure. We haven't specifically pursued a quote around that, but I think there's been conversations around 50 to 70,000.
You've got some three sort of aspects which you wanted to cover here. One is around the actual accreditation itself and what steps you'll need to achieve that and how you go about it. Two, you would need resources that are focused on destination and tourist management. And three, you'll need resource around the technical engineering type requirements. So it's multiple resources that are needed to deal with this one.
And we want to do it properly. So, yeah, but we also, if we just saying yes to this now basically means we're not going to do anything for 12 months. We're going to seek some budget. And it just feels like we're telling the community, actually, I know we want to keep talking about it, but we're not going to put any budget aside until 24-34. And then it'll take us 12 months to come up with a plan. It'll take us another 12 months to start thinking about it. So it's a 27-37 type discussion. I'm just not sure that's actually the desire of the room or the desire of our community based on all the conversations and feedback that we've had. So I would rather see us put some money to allow at least the development of a plan. So when we go to the LTP next year, we can say, we've done some preliminary work. We think these are the things we should push play on. And this is the required budget to make it happen. If it's not ready for the LTP, like anything, it just gets put off for another 3 years because we haven't actually put the funding in already. So it's either a priority or not for the room, though.
So that's the question for me. How much of a priority is this the council? We've got a lot of other things that we're looking to invest in. And it's also one of those be careful of what you ask for scenarios. So Is the community really aware of the implications? Come back to Sophie's point about if we're going to turn the lights off to attract people to dark sky, it's going to be a whole different community moving up there for different reasons. I think Grant's somewhat pragmatic suggestion of just taking a trial of turning the lights off for 6 months is probably a far better solution at this stage.
Murray and then Grant.
Yeah, I don't want to drag this discussion out, but if we're looking at the LTP 2434, you have to have some sort of answers by Christmas. I'm not sure that there's a couple of things of that part C that consider isn't strong enough in terms of a resolution. I would have said hold a summer trial. I don't know if you're going to need 6 months to know what it looks like when the lights are turned off. So you might find that you can come to some pretty good conclusions within a few days or a week or a month, and it might be getting the right people there at the right time. So I would suggest the word might be hold a summer trial of turning the lights off, the street lights off, is more specific about what you're intending to do.
Grant.
Usually I moan about how slow council goes. I reckon this might be a time where we want to take our time because I think we've realised there's a number of implications just in the short conversation we've had now that we hadn't considered even 10 minutes ago. I'm still in favour of the, you could consider and recommend a trial of 6 months might be better word, but when you consider the magnitude of Tamutu, Castle Hill, Coleridge, and does it need to even be dark sky accreditation? Can it be a bespoke Selwyn solution where we just use it through our district planning rules that we do have areas within our area that are considered dark sky? That it may scale it down, be more manageable, and we can be bespoke for us. So much as I can't believe it's coming out of my mouth, slow down, go a bit slow, write this down. The staff know what they're doing. All those good words. Yeah, I guess that's what I'm suggesting is let's stick to the core stuff they're asking us for and let the staff just do the time in a timely manner, which considers the issues in front of us, which we've already just started to pick up ourselves.
Thank you. Sophie?
Yeah, just adding to that, so we spent a long time figuring out how much it was going to cost to get, say, business cases done for things like the cycle trails, Kitikitai, and around the lake. That's not an insignificant sum to suddenly try to throw at an extra tourism business case, although arguably related. So if there's anything that could be fitted into those business cases around it, just to feel out what would be necessary for dark skies, or at least in terms of accommodation and infrastructure that would aid them all, would be great. But that's the level of work that you're probably talking about in terms of trying to cover that much extra work. And I'm not sure that Denise's team are particularly keen to throw that in on top of what they've already got on their plates. But if we're going to do a trial of turning the lights off, I think it would be really valuable to also get Melbourne Community Board or anybody to actually ask the people around, not just Tamutu. I mean, I think they're pretty good at forecasting and thinking what the implications are for a lot of things down there, but particularly around Castle Hill. Do they realise, long-term wise, they know what Takapuna looks like. So is that what they want their community to look like if this goes forward? Because if so, then that's a good reason to try and include a bit more information later on, to get it off budget, to get extra stuff done. If they don't, if that's the sort of thing that makes the long-term actual full-time residents there recoil in horror, as opposed to the ones who are renting out their bungalows as Airbnbs, then perhaps then we start thinking in a different track.
Thank you. Denise, do you need B to include the other streetlight profile stuff, the destination management work? I mean, you're going to do that anyway as part of that work. We don't need to specifically say it.
Yeah, I guess from my point of view, it's timely that it can be loaded within the economic development plan that we're currently in the process of developing. So we can take care of that.
Okay, so we can leave it as it is. I think we get rid of the word consider because we're not asking staff to consider it. We're directing that this is a piece of work that will come to the long-term plan. And we take out the months, so it gives flexibility around when that's going to happen and for how long. Take out 6 months as well. Mover and seconder. Grant.
No, yeah, what, a trial of what?
It's a trial of turning off the streetlights in Castle Hill Village. We'll clean that up.
Moving to the dark side.
You got that? And B, get rid of consider. They will pursue, consider that can go, yeah. Okay, does that clear now? Mover, seconder, Lydia, Grant, you're, yep. All those in favour say aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. The outcomes we can, but if we're saying we're doing the trial, we won't be asking them about whether or not they want to control it. Provision of amenities and facilities, parks and reserves. And then we'll be doing new public toilet in Kuwi. So this is that council acknowledge the submissions received and recommends rubbish and recycling bins are installed in the old library reserve on Leeston Road next to the toilets, and acknowledges that staff will review amenity provisions through the formation of the annual plan. Thanks, Shane. Seconder. Deborah, any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Against? Declare it carried. New public toilets in Kuwi. And that'll be followed by biodiversity funding. So this acknowledges the submissions received and notes that this matter was raised by submitters during the previous annual plan, and council agreed to defer its decision until a sewer connection was available. Acknowledges the sewer connection is now imminent and the project has been identified for inclusion into round 7 application, where up to 50% of the cost could be secured. Agreed that staff recommends a contingent amount of 97,500 in this coming annual plan to cover 50% of the cost for the toilet, with the balance covered by TIF funding. Lydia moved, seconded. Deborah, any discussion? Sophie.
What happens if we don't get the TIF funding?
Signs, better signage.
Better signage and a long-term plan discussion. Murray?
That's a very good point. And there is no guarantee because we do know that it's likely to be a preference for projects, places affected by Cyclone Gabrielle. So it is a risk, and I would suggest at that point then you consider it a long-term plan.
Yep.
And because it's an additional cost.
Cool. Lydia moved. Someone second? Deborah, thank you. Any further conversation? All those in favour say aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. Biodiversity funding. Council acknowledged the submissions received and notes the biodiversity funding currently issued by council was welcomed and has been used to great effect, and the future funding will be considered in the 24-34 long-term plan. So there's no change from where we currently sit. Malcolm moved, seconded. Sophie, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. The next one is funding requests. The council acknowledged the submissions received and notes a review of council funds around strategic partnerships will occur as part of the long-term plan discussion. So again, we're not changing anything here. Malcolm moved. Shane seconded. Any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. Planning. Is this where you want to declare that interest for the three of you? It's a public discussion, so you don't have to leave the room, but you're taking no part in the discussion or the decision. And the recommendation is the council acknowledges the submissions received and notes that planning matters are outside the scope of this annual plan. Mover, Sophie, seconded. Lydia, oh, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. Welcome back to the table. Malcolm, Deborah, and Nicole. The next one is climate change. And the recommendation is that council acknowledge the submissions received and note that staff are conducting further work in this area through the review of the Selwyn climate change policy and by interweaving climate change and sustainability throughout the formation of the long-term plan. Mover and seconder for that direction. Malcolm, seconded. Sophie, any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. The next item is internal audit resourcing. The recommendation is that an internal audit program is established and resourced by independent experts based on the topic of a review which provides management and governance further assurance that the council's risks have been appropriately identified and managed and that the controls that staff use are effective. Further 160 be added, included in the budget for the provision of internal audit services. Deborah.
Just out of curiosity, wouldn't this be covered under our democracy budget? And I would have assumed that we would be able to find 160,000 K within our, or a portion of that within our democracy budget as it currently stands.
This is new work that doesn't sit along work streams that have already been there. Is a request from the Audit and Risk Committee around looking at the work that we do internally to get ourselves or to understand, I suppose, what's going on here and to also make sure that we're ready for things that need to be presented externally. It's been good practice from a governance perspective, and I think it helps management understand our expectations. Annalisa has brought this to us based on a lot of her other work to think about how we align ourselves with what best practice would look like and our own internal audit program, and to be able to fund that sufficiently. We'll be picking up, I think, 2 or 3, Kelvin, you'll be able to speak to this as well, 2 or 3 particular pieces of work to focus on, and there'll be a plan that would be developed to think about what that would look like. Kelvin, do you want to speak to it?
Yeah, you've covered that well, Sam. It's literally providing assurance to yourselves as governors and to us as management that we are managing our risks effectively as an organisation. So, for example, that we've got effective controls around spend, sensitive expenditures being appropriately applied, those types of reviews. Additionally, it may be looking at how we undertake project management, forecasting, which there's been discussions around where we can take learnings forward, and in other areas where there may be issues around processes. In terms of the democracy budget, I would see this as being something similar to what you'd see with the external audit. So the Audit New Zealand budget, which doesn't sit within democracy, hence why we're asking for the additional funding.
Yeah, I'm quite happy having heard that explanation, but I was also concerned, is it not true that our auditor fees are going up as well this year? So we're auditing even more. So we're spending, this is a lot of money, 160K, and our audit fees are going up as well. I'm just a bit nervous about the amount of money we're spending here.
Good question to ask. I think we've got to remind ourselves too, we're looking after $2.5 billion worth of assets for our community and making sure we do that well and are accountable for the decisions we make, and can show that on reflection, and our auditing works for us. So I agree, Malcolm, particularly around the external audit, crazy prices. Grant.
I think, I guess I'd defer to Kelvin and want to understand, given the sum, couldn't we resource it with a dedicated internal audit person rather than having independent audits? Is the key focus of this having an independent person come in? I know we did discuss having an internal audit function resource from internally within the business. It would seem we should be able to resource that for less than 160K, I would have thought, but is the whole driver for this to have it an independent third party, and particularly if they're one of the big 4, they're going to charge like a wind ball, aren't they? We've got to get value out of it.
So internal audit needs to sit somewhat independent from management to provide that separation, and that can be achieved internally. The real issue is around the specialist nature of the resource. So by going to a third party, you can pick and choose as to what resource you need at the time. So if we're doing an internal audit on engineering practices, having someone internal with that skill set becomes challenging, who can also deal with some financial matters. So it's about picking the right resource at the right time.
Are we approving this as a one-off for just this year? Or is it, you're saying we're going to build this into the budget for the continuing years? I mean, again, the trial, is this the saying, well, after year one, we're going to say, well, actually, that was a great spend of 160K and we think it was invaluable, or B, no, it wasn't, so it's a good spend and we might do it internally. What's the time limit on this funding?
This continues in perpetuity. It's similar to what you'd have with the external financial auditor. It is considered best practice from a governance point of view. Really, it is a call upon the governors as to what you would like around assurance, but the recommendation coming from the committee, which Phil and Nicole have been part of the discussion on, so it might be useful to hear from them.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, so in terms of things like the Auditor General and everything else, do they charge by the hour? And if so, does doing this mean that they're going to spend less time, shaking heads all around? Okay, then. So it's not going to save anything anywhere else. It's just going to keep us on track a bit more internally. Okay, thanks.
I guess, yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess internal audit process is something that is recommended for an organisation of this size, and it was identified through the Audit and Risk Committee perhaps a year ago to put this forward. So I do think it is necessary to have an internal auditor and have the processes of the 3 lines of defence within the organisation of this size. Picking up on Grant's point around solely focused on this work, I believe it's a number of roles, including head of risk and head of legal as well. So there's quite a large role that this the establishment of this puts in line. So I'm happy to move.
Thanks.
This wouldn't be a person that would sit at head of risk or head of legal. This is about being able to procure the resource at the appropriate skill level to report back around internal audits for us. And it wouldn't necessarily be the big 4, Grant, like you say, talking with Al Lorne about thinking in the emergency spaces, like we should still, there's people with specific skills that actually can focus in on stuff rather than getting generalists in spaces. So I think we want to make sure we're getting the right people into the right place. Phil?
Well, I was about to say this a bit. The Grant, this is the internal person. What's it? Calvin has got the overarching overall. This is to have a deeper dive into some of the more risky areas, and to have it as a ongoing thing is always going to need to be said. Yes, it's not just one.
I don't have much to add on it, but it as has been said, it's common practice to have external people or other eyes looking at what we're doing. It can only I think be a good thing to actually see if there is, if we're going well, then we'll know we're going well. If there's suggestions of changes, then we'll know to do that as well. So,
Thank you. You have a second, Nicole?
Yeah.
Okay, move Shane, seconded Nicole. Any further discussion?
I'll just note that our auditors usually have matters of interest when they start their actual annual audit. So there is a key areas of focus from our existing auditors. So we want to make sure that we're not paying twice for the same service. And it's targeted to areas that are outside the scope of our existing external audit from our New Zealand audit team.
Yep.
Because I'd hate to see us paying for the same service twice.
Yes. That brings us to the end of the items that have been grouped. All those in favour that we have that, say aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. That brings us to the end of the grouped items. Are there matters that have been brought up through submission that have not been captured by this that people would like to discuss? No? Oh.
Are these supposed to go to this?
that's right. Can we take a break?
Yeah. what I'm interested to know what the committee would like to understand further and what other discussion needs to occur.
Well, can we do a page turn of this to make sure that we've covered? I don't know.
I guess just as some of it's low level stuff, and you may have it, on this big thing of talking about the stock truck parking, by the
Yeah.
Darfield pub. For instance, it just says we acknowledge the submission on the potholes on the grass, and we repair the grass verge, but it doesn't really fix the problem, does it? I mean, the suggestion might be, can they go to Fru's yard? Can they go into the cyclone yard? I mean, there needs to be a longer term solution to get these guys from parking out in front of someone's house with stock trucks all night.
Yeah,
I'm not
that one,
suggesting we solve that problem internally here, but I'm just trying to understand what the process is from here, that you've got it under control.
yeah, that particular one is very much an operational matter, which is under control at the moment and also occupying quite a bit of time for the Melbourne Community Board.
Right.
So I guess the discussion today is on matters that are of annual plan importance. And so there'll be some things, as David said, that have come through that staff have picked up that will be operational in nature and don't require a decision of council to either provide for or exclude stock truck parking on a particular road. So that's the level of discussion that we want to be having today. If there are other matters that are in here, I'm happy that if we want to take morning tea, maybe people can consider whether or not there's other matters that needs to be raised that haven't been addressed, and then we can come back and do that. So the time now is, let's reconvene at 11:15. No, we always take more than 15 minutes. We'll come back at 10 past. I'll give you 5 minutes less. 10 past 11, and we'll follow through any further matters. Thank you. Welcome back to annual plan discussion. We've made our way through all of the grouped items based on submission topic. If there are items that people would like to raise that haven't been caught, that are of an annual plan nature to discuss, then please feel free to raise them now. I'm happy to do a page turn just in case people have made notes, but it'll be the front page starts off on the big A3 sheets with Hamish Crombie as the first submitter there. Is there anything on that page that people wanted to raise? The second page is on the back of that. Belinda Margits, anything on that page people wanted to raise? Colette Doughty is the start of the next page. Anything there that people wanted to raise?
General terms about roading upgrades. We spoke to Nigel Bowen about maybe trying to talk to the other Canterbury mayors about a package of roads that might go into Waka Kotahi as a state highway transfer. Is that something we'd address later, or how would we progress that? Is it
So I've got a regional transport committee meeting on Thursday, and the intention is to raise it there with Waka Kotahi. James Cagle will be there.
Okay, thank you.
So the Colette Doughty page, was anything there that people wanted to raise? Turn over. The name is withheld. Anything on that page?
No, sorry.
Working through the A3 sheets that everyone's got.
Can I, sorry.
Yes, Nicole.
Clarification on a couple of ones on that Colette Doughty
Yes.
page. I wasn't sure what you're meaning when you said that.
Colette Doughty is the top of the name at the top of this page, Nicole.
Yep. I'm looking now at Megan Carpenter.
Yeah, what's the submission number?
It doesn't say on this
We've
page.
got no numbers on ours.
Also, the top page numbers of things on this page does not match what's at the top of the page on what we've got online, so don't have our notes from Diligent to go about this today.
Scramble to link your digital notes with the paper copy that we're turning over. We're down looking at Megan Carpenter, Nicole.
Yep. So it says reserves team can consider this request, but does prioritise replacement trees. So when we're seeing something written like that, it is actually being put somewhere to be looked at. I mean, I'm not wanting to say I'm prioritising these trees, but staff have definitely.
Yes, if there's a note, I mean, staff have seen the submission and it's a matter for staff to determine what the outcome is.
So the next one is Stu Big. Now it looks like we staff might have used, which is understandable with the comments, used similar comments the way through. Just with this one, so talking recommend this option because the footpath requested, blah blah blah, requested 300. The last comment though, I'm correct. SCC requested 300k under low cost risk program for the 21-24 from Waka Kotahi, but the request was declined, and then renewal funds cannot be used for small improvements like this. So what does that mean? So with that project and other projects, are we saying that we are looking at them, or we can't do anything about them, or we've just approved a budget?
I think we're saying we've approved $150,000 and the spend of that will be brought back through Deborah and Sophie's committee, and the answer to the specific request will be made by that committee.
And then we can say that for each of the ones that that comment has been made in response to requests for footpaths.
That's the only fair way to do it, is to say we're looking.
No, I just want to.
Microphone, Murray. Is the microphone on?
Yeah, it is.
Oh, yeah, cool. Sorry.
Yeah, that's the only fair way to say is we'll consider your request and we work through the prioritisation process. Otherwise, we'll be doing less than desirable projects at expense of other ones.
No, I just wanted that clarified. So thank you.
Cool. Grant.
Sorry, well, I shouldn't be on.
No, that's right. Okay, so over the next page, which the first name at the top is withheld. Anything there? The following page starts Wendy Thompson.
Yep.
Right.
Just a matter of clarity, it may have already been the foodstuffs around the traffic light upgrade that we as a council have already approved that, moving it forward, haven't we? That's what it's saying?
So repeat that. So-
Foodstuffs submission asking for the traffic light upgrade on Lowe's Road to be brought forward.
Yeah.
We as a council had already approved that. Is that right?
Yeah.
Is that my understanding?
Yeah, it's already in our program.
All right, thank you. Just
It's
clarity.
just the timing of it that was, they were wanting a bit earlier.
Sorry,
Nicole?
just on, so that withheld paid. So Annabelle Bassett, who's the next one
Mhm.
down, I just would like if, potentially staff could make more, so comments will be going back to submitters, won't they, in response to what was done? I was just wondering.
Sorry, just to answer that, general outcomes of the deliberations go back. We do not provide specifics on each of the submissions.
Okay,
It becomes unmanageable when we get to an LTP scenario where you may have 500-600 responses.
no, that's all right, because I mean, the issue, and there's been another person as well is questioning about cycleways, and being quite dismissive about that. We're getting some funding, extra funding for that, but it's also meaning like the West Melton one, that's the seniors, well, the secondary school students go to Rolleston College. So it makes sense that we have that path going between, as opposed to saying how many people are using it and such like that, which this person is inferring.
So we're not going to respond to each
No,
submission
but-
in their detail. Right? No, Lydia?
I just wonder if we want to talk a little bit more about Wendy Thompson, and how that is moving forward. And you know, what are we actually going to do around heavy trucks parking there? Because I don't know if we can entirely stop them.
We're not going to make any decision in an annual plan process about whether or not trucks can park on a legal road.
Great. Thank you.
The page starting Ildika Boyd.
Sam,
Yes.
second to bottom, Leeston Southbridge Cricket Club. I have real concerns about that response because it suggests that we support building changing rooms and toilets when that whole project is not yet clearly defined and approved. For instance, there's already existing changing rooms and toilets in the rugby club, which that money could be reallocated to doing them up, or it could be part of our community centre library build. To suggest that we're going to go and build a brand new building there doesn't seem to align. We're not far enough in the planning process to. It's like it's an outline and saying a suggestion on a budget, but it's not actually approved, in my view.
Kelvin, have you got comment on that?
There is a budget.
We seem to be there's a budget there, but
Yeah.
we seem to be incrementally rubber stamping a project or a build which is not actually defined where it would be and what it is. Just say that I think it's better to say there's a budget approved for that facility, but
I'm not sure the detail of the budget. I need to check that out, but it must have come through the LTP and then folded into the draft plan.
yeah, there's definitely a budget there. In other projects, we've generally folded them into like the West Melton or Taitapu, we've generally folded it into the build and included it in the build of a community centre. But for this, as it stands at the moment, this is a standalone facility and doesn't take into account the existing changing rooms in the rugby club building or otherwise. It just says we're going to build another separate building again. And
Dan?
Yes.
I'll just make one comment. There is money obviously allocated in their master plan for work around the actual reserves around at Leeston. However, given where we're at with the whole Whātaro project, we won't be proceeding with anything that might be counterproductive to that whole project.
And I think that's what you're asking.
But asking to
Yeah,
reflect,
yeah,
just
yeah.
say we've got budget, but we haven't
Yeah, it's-
finalised what.
We are very joined up in that respect because Phil is an integral part of the project team.
So I think part of the commentary, we're not trying to get to say that we're not going to do individual projects at Leeston Park until we understand what the total project is. So there needs to be some feedback to the submitter that's clear that around that decision making piece, because we're not clear as a council.
The problem
What it is we're
is,
delivering
the
there.
problem, we can't really communicate it to the community without actually going to the whole communication around the whole project at this point. So it's got to be done as part of that whole comm package. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Good. Shane.
Sorry. Yeah, I think you've answered it, Sam. The budget set aside is 842144, and I commend Blair Templeton for his submission because it's something that's been asking for a while. But I just want assurance that that cricket group is part of the process that we're undertaking for the wider suite of services in the Waihora Whatato project.
Okay. Rachel Wiseman is at the top of the next page. Sophie.
Yep, Belinda Marget's raising the perennial district park question, large scale park, which I know that there is a plan around it. I just cannot remember the details of where we're at now because it's another of those projects that gets pushed back and pushed back.
It's a future LTP discussion, Sophie. We're at executive team level just asking the why question. Is that the why are we involved in development on that site as opposed to potential other sites? So that'll be front and centre over the next few months.
So there's no decision today to progress or not progress anything particular. Yep. Cool. Grant.
Anna Penn, like initially it seemed like a low level, quite a nice thing to do. But I think given the growth of Selwyn, perhaps we just need to be a bit careful that we don't start putting memorial gardens and walls and all over the countryside and find out we end up with a whole lot of maintenance. I think we need to be very strategic around being clear to people that if they move to locations, there are no cemeteries there. You go to wherever the council's cemetery is, and we've said that in Ralston. We're not building a roll summary here. We've got Shands and we've got
Yeah.
Let's try and centralise our efforts because this is going to be a bigger problem for us in the future. If we just start to sort of ad hoc bits here and bits there, it's going to be a problem for us. And I think while it's a nice feel good, just a bit strategic would be good, I think.
And I think the response here that council would consider the possibility of installing isn't saying we're going to jump on something, but that would
I think the reader would say we're doing it from that. I'm guessing I would. Yeah.
Okay. People agree that the direction isn't that we're going to just jump and do it, but cool. Okay. Next page after Rachel is Russell Dalzell. Anything on that page, Shane?
Yes, Sam, commend staff's recommendation there. I see 35K has been set aside for according to Russell, and appreciate his submission. The major concern really was the safety of the elderly patrons and guests, where there has been a number of falls. I don't think it should take to this period of time for those parts of the building to be repaired. The staff have recommended that council agree to approving the budget. However, there's no mention of what that budget is, or am I missing something? And apologise if I have.
Murray?
Sorry, I don't have the detail. All it says is $35,000 actually in the budget, and that's actually going to be spent. So I can't find any other nuances at this stage.
And can be covered under maintenance budgets. So yeah, cool. Anyone on the Nikki Jacobs page? Or the Chris Burke page?
Oh, sorry, the
Nicole.
going back the Nikki Jacobs page, the bottom, so Chris Burke has brought up about Foster Park, the wildflower bed, and it's just interesting that they're wanting to change, so the wildflower area at Foster Park, re-landscape with a rejuvenated planting scheme, which I'm not sure what that means, but I'm just conscious that the likes of apparently Hagley Park, they've gone to a whole lot of wildflower type beds like we've got. And I heard a thing on the radio about Canterbury University's setting aside an area to do that. And it's obviously promoting bees and getting bees and stuff there. So I just question where we're going with this one at Foster Park. I mean, this was one that John Reed put in, was the wildflowers. I'll just raise that question. Thank you.
Sorry?
Oh, I think it's probably one where Nicole could have a discussion with either Phil or our reserve people on what their plans are. It's actually quite a lot of detail. We do have a number of people who are well trained and skilled in garden, so they could provide that detail.
Cool. Yep. I think it'd probably be something that could come back through your report, Murray, too, to think about what's some of the landscape direction around plantings and what we use, tree species. It's quite a big discussion if you expand it out.
And to be fair, it might be tied in with the removal of the house. And since the house has been removed, there's been quite a thinning of some of the major pine trees down there as well. So it might be useful for Phil or someone to come back with a bit of an update on where they are of the overall landscaping plan.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The next page starts with Chris Burke, and the following page starts withheld. And the next page starts Connor Boyd.
Yes, Your Worship.
Yep.
Emma Street, halfway down Springfield Community Association member. Councillors might have more to say, but approving a budget, staff recommend council agree to approve the $5,000 budget. I think it's a good cause. Where does that budget come from?
Murray or Kelvin?
So I got lost in all that.
So there's $5,000 approved to go to Springfield pump track development and planning. Shane's question is that money that was already allocated, or is that new money to the long term to the annual plan? Yeah, 5,000. Wherever it comes from, it's not going to change the rating. There's not going to be a rating impact.
Material.
No. Okay. Alex Booker starts the next page. Withheld is the following page. Grant.
A general comment on third to bottom around water races which we don't want to pay or don't use, and I think Lydia's raised it as well recently, is that perhaps we need to schedule a further review, particularly in the Melbourne area. The water races are now becoming more a drainage network than a water race network, and particularly the management of the water races, advance notification of rainfall events. We could be closing the networks a lot earlier to actually get more drainage into our water races. So nothing perhaps for this annual plan, but I'm just asking, can we have that rescheduled to perhaps look at? We don't have a water race committee. I'm not sure which committee it goes to now, but it does need before or during, well, right now, basically before winter again, having a further look at that and issues around, particularly now that with irrigation prevalent in that area, that there's not as much soakage in the sponge before it starts to flow overland.
It'll be part of Deborah's committee with Murray reporting back. It's probably about 3 years ago now. We did a major survey of all water race users, and unfortunately it came back that 50% of them, well, when I say unfortunately, 50% of them wanted to keep the water races as they are, and about 50% of them wanted to close them down. So there was a huge variety then. So as time has gone on, it'll be interesting to see if that's been updated, Grant.
I think the key suggestion was we got partially there by amalgamating drainage, but the suggestion at the time was that we amalgamate water races and land drainage into one outfit, and I think that's had some real merit in it.
Yeah, so no change for this annual plan, but we're thinking about
just saying two pieces of work. One is the ongoing request from individuals to close sections of races, which we'll handle. The other one is the long-term strategic overview of what the water race network should be.
Yes.
And how we get to where we should be with it, and who's going to manage it long-term, and how we're going to rate for it long-term. Yeah, big stuff.
Long-term plan discussion. Thank you. Sophie.
Yeah, just wanted to add to that if water races are more of a stormwater issue now, then we start bringing in other issues around the management of stormwater. So I don't know where it's going to sit in the long term, but it's fun times.
Yeah. Yeah, and there was one yesterday, obviously, that you've all received, and that's an issue. What happens where stormwater goes in an event, quite often our water races become the pickup point. That's why we shut our water races off at the start of a storm or before a storm, because they do pick up water. And is it a water race issue? Is it a stormwater issue? And that's why it's very hard to differentiate between future stormwater management, water race management, and a discussion we'll probably have in the long-term plan with ECAP.
Thank you. Annabelle Bassett is the top of the next page.
Yes, Your Worship,
Shane.
this third one down, Chris Burke, acknowledging the Five Waters work that you've just been mentioning, you've all just been mentioning, ensuring that Coast Forward is part of that discussion as well.
No change from direction. Cool. Withheld is the start of the next page. Michael Flanagan tops the next page. Tim Ogle starts the following page. Sophie.
Yeah, there's one second from the bottom there. It was name withheld, discussing the part about the green prescription. So our sheet doesn't actually show the whole answer. So I'm just wondering if there's any implications of it. All I can read, including online, was staff recognise there have been recent changes in the Canterbury contract for green prescription, and staff will, and it stops right there. So this person was asking for a discount for people on green prescription at sports facilities, so for swimming and exercising. And I'm just wondering if that's, I don't know how many people that is, if it's a staff will look into.
We are,
Denise?
as part of the fees and charges report that's coming in, we are looking at what are the changes and what does it impact around that mean, and does that mean we can offer discounts? So we haven't formed a view about that, but we know we have to investigate, and we will report on it through that report.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next page starts Polly Miller. Then Alison Rosanowski.
Oh, sorry, Your Worship.
Shane.
Was it fourth from the bottom? Russell Dalzell again, Dunsandel Community Committee. Staff confirming the role of this roving secretary will be discontinued on 1st of July. Just want to ensure that's been communicated through to the committee.
Denise.
It has in a general sense, but most of the communication has been directly with affected staff. So certainly they were consulted as part of the organisational restructure. Certainly there was communication, there was some feedback, and they were communicated with regarding the results. And in the last month, they have been sent an update in terms of that expectation. So that isn't, so that's the communication has been directly with the staff members, but we can communicate the impact of that directly with Dunsandel. Yeah.
Cool, thank you. The next page starts Alison Rosanowski as well, finishes Nicola Stokes. The following page starts Nancy Wright. Lydia.
I'd just like some clarification around the community boards, the second from the bottom, and around the shade policy. And I know that we don't have a particular shade policy, but is it wise to include tree canopy cover instead of structures and pergolas? I feel like that's a win-win for everyone. We're increasing tree canopy, and it's probably at a less cost than structures.
Yeah, that'll be part of the review process, Lydia.
So we're not making a decision on that today, but that's noted for when that work happens.
Thank you.
Mariana Hamilton starts the next page. and withheld on the final page. That takes us through all of the group submissions and all of the individual submissions to this year's annual plan. There's one decision that we skipped at the start, which confirms the rating will be unchanged from what was put out in the draft annual plan. Acknowledges all the submissions received and recommends the level of rating increase remain unchanged, except for the Canterbury Museum levy, where there is. Mover and seconder for that. Malcolm, thank you. Seconded. Sophie, any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. This now forms part of a report that will come to the 28th of June council meeting, including the setting of the rates, and there's a few other papers that come through every year on that. David, do you have any, or Kelvin, any final comments that you'd like to add or say?
No, nothing for me. Just again, thank you to everybody for a very succinct process that's been followed this year. Melvin? Good? Yep, we're good.
Great. Close with karakia, unahia, te po, kia wātia, ai kua wātia. Kia ora koutou everyone, thank you for your contributions. Meeting closed.
Lunch will be available next door for those that are hanging around.
Councillors, we're keen to have a councillor only time discussion, so we might just do that now. In 5 minutes once